8-year-old Emma sat on the front steps of her grandmother's house, gently brushing the golden fur of her beloved dog. Max. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street, and the quiet neighborhood seemed peaceful as always. Max was a 3-year-old golden retriever who had been Emma's constant companion since her parents had adopted him from the local animal shelter 2 years ago. The dog had bright, intelligent eyes and a gentle nature that made him perfect for a young girl who often felt shy around other children. Emma's grandmother, Mrs. Rodriguez, had invited her to spend the weekend at her cozy house on the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue. The elderly woman believed that fresh air and quiet time away from the busy city would be good for Emma, who had been struggling with nightmares lately. Emma's parents worked long hours at their respective jobs, and they thought their daughter could benefit from the slower pace of suburban life. The little girl loved visiting her grandmother's neighborhood because it felt safe and familiar. The houses were older but well-maintained, with large front yards and tall oak trees that provided plenty of shade. Children often rode their bicycles on the sidewalks, and neighbors would wave to each other while working in their gardens. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and looked out for one another. Max had been acting restless all afternoon, pacing back and forth on the front porch and occasionally whimpering softly. Emma noticed that her dog kept looking toward the intersection where Maple Street met the busier Oak Avenue. She wondered if Max could sense something that she couldn't. Dogs were known for their ability to detect things that humans missed, and Max had always been particularly sensitive to changes in his environment. Officer James Mitchell had been patrolling this neighborhood for over 15 years. He was a respected member of the community who took pride in keeping the streets safe for families like Emma's. Officer Mitchell was known for his kindness toward children and his patience with elderly residents who sometimes called about minor concerns. He had a daughter of his own who was close to Emma's age, which made him especially protective of the young people in his patrol area. On this particular Saturday afternoon, Officer Mitchell was responding to a routine call about a minor fender bender that had occurred earlier near the shopping center. The accident had been cleared, but he needed to file a final report and check that traffic was flowing normally through the intersection. He had driven through this neighborhood countless times and knew every street, every stop sign, and every potential hazard. As Emma continued brushing Max's fur, she noticed a red pickup truck approaching the intersection at what seemed like an unusually high speed. The truck appeared to be older, with some rust around the wheel wells and a loud exhaust that could be heard from several blocks away. Emma had learned about traffic safety in school and knew that vehicles were supposed to slow down when approaching intersections, especially in residential areas where children might be playing. Max suddenly stood up and began barking, which was unusual for the normally calm dog. Emma tried to quiet him by placing her hand on his head, but Max seemed agitated and kept looking toward the intersection. The dog's ears were standing straight up and his tail was rigid with tension. Emma followed Max's gaze and saw Officer Mitchell's patrol car approaching from the opposite direction. The red truck showed no signs of slowing down as it neared the stop sign at the intersection. Emma could see that the driver appeared to be looking down, possibly at something in his lap rather than paying attention to the road ahead. She had heard her parents and teachers talk about the dangers of distracted driving, and she was beginning to feel worried about what might happen. Officer Mitchell was driving at a normal speed and had the right of way as he approached the intersection. His patrol car was clearly visible, with its distinctive black and white markings and the word police written in large letters on the side. The afternoon sun was shining directly on the vehicle, making it even more noticeable to anyone who might be looking. Emma stood up from the front steps, still holding Max's leash tightly in her small hand. Something about the situation felt wrong, and she wished her grandmother would come. Outside, Mrs. Rodriguez was inside preparing dinner and was unaware of what was developing at the intersection just a few yards from her front door. The red truck was now only a few car lengths away from the stop sign, but it still wasn't slowing down. Emma could see that Officer Mitchell was beginning to enter the intersection, probably assuming that the truck would stop as required by law. The little girl felt her heart beginning to beat faster as she realized that something terrible might be about to happen. Max was now pulling on his leash and whimpering more loudly. The dog seemed to understand that danger was approaching, even though he couldn't do anything to prevent it. Emma found herself taking a few steps closer to the street, though she stayed on her grandmother's property as she had been taught. The driver of the red truck finally looked up just as he reached the intersection, but it was too late to stop safely. Emma could see the man's eyes widen with shock as he realized that he was about to run the stop sign and collide with the police officer's vehicle. The truck's brakes made a loud squealing sound as the driver attempted to stop, but the vehicle's momentum carried it forward into the intersection. Officer Mitchell saw the truck at the last moment and tried to swerve to avoid the collision. But there wasn't enough time or space to maneuver safely. The red truck struck the passenger side of the patrol car with tremendous force, causing both vehicles to spin and creating a loud crash that could be heard for several blocks. Emma watched in horror as the police car came to rest against a fire hydrant on the far side of the intersection. Steam was rising from under the hood, and she could see that the passenger side was badly damaged. The red truck had ended up on the sidewalk, its front end crumpled and its driver slumped over the steering wheel. The little girl stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Max was barking frantically now, and she could hear doors slamming as neighbors began to emerge from their houses to see what had happened. Emma knew that she had just witnessed something serious, and she realized that the police officer might be hurt and need help. The sound of the crash echoed through the quiet neighborhood like thunder on a clear day. Emma's hands trembled as she held Max's leash, watching smoke rise from both vehicles at the intersection. The red truck's horn was stuck, creating a continuous honking sound that seemed to pierce through everything else. Neighbors began running toward the scene from all directions, their faces filled with concern and shock. Mrs. Rodriguez burst through her front door after hearing the terrible noise. When she saw Emma standing at the edge of the yard, staring at the accident scene, she quickly moved to her granddaughter's side. The elderly woman wrapped her arms around Emma protectively while trying to assess the situation. She could see that both the police car and the red truck were severely damaged, and she immediately understood that people might be seriously injured. Officer Mitchell was conscious but dazed inside his patrol car. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead where he had struck the driver's side window during the impact. His left shoulder ached terribly and he was having difficulty moving his arm. Despite his injuries, his first instinct was to check on the other driver and call for emergency assistance. He reached for his radio with his right hand, though the movement caused sharp pain to shoot through his ribs. The driver of the red truck, a man in his 40s named Robert Chen, was slumped forward against his steering wheel. He had been texting his wife about picking up groceries when he failed to notice the stop sign and the approaching police car. Robert was unconscious, and a significant amount of blood was visible on his face from where he had hit the dashboard during the collision. His cell phone lay shattered on the passenger seat beside him. Emma noticed that Max had stopped barking and was now whimpering softly while pulling gently toward the intersection. The dog seemed to want to help somehow, as if he understood that people were hurt and needed assistance. Emma looked up at her grandmother and asked in a small voice whether the police officer and the other man were going to be okay. Mrs. Rodriguez told her granddaughter that help would arrive soon, but Emma could hear the worry in the older woman's voice. Within minutes, the intersection filled with concerned neighbors. Mr. Johnson from across the street ran toward Officer Mitchell's car, while Mrs. Patterson, who was a retired nurse, hurried to check on the driver of the red truck. Several other residents began directing traffic around the accident scene to prevent additional collisions. Someone had already called emergency services, and the distant sound of sirens could be heard approaching. Officer Mitchell managed to radio for backup and medical assistance despite his injuries. His voice was strained but clear as he provided details about the accident location and the apparent condition of both drivers. He emphasized that the other driver appeared to be unconscious and would need immediate medical attention. The dispatcher assured him that ambulances and additional officers were already on their way. Emma watched as Mrs. Patterson carefully approached the red truck. The retired nurse checked Robert's pulse and breathing without moving him, knowing that he might have neck or spinal injuries that could be made worse by improper handling. She called out to the other neighbors that the man was alive, but needed professional medical care as quickly as possible. Her calm, professional demeanor helped to reassure everyone that the situation was being handled properly. Max suddenly broke free from Emma's grip and ran toward Officer Mitchell's patrol car before anyone could stop him. Emma called out her dog's name and started to follow, but her grandmother held her back for safety reasons. However, Max didn't interfere with the rescue efforts. Instead, the intelligent dog sat quietly beside the patrol car, as if he was standing guard over the injured officer. Officer Mitchell noticed Max through his partially open window and managed to smile slightly despite his pain. He had always been fond of dogs, and Max's presence seemed to provide some comfort during this frightening situation. The officer slowly reached out his uninjured right hand toward the window, and Max gently touched his nose to the officer's fingers. This simple interaction helped Officer Mitchell stay calm while waiting for medical assistance to arrive. The first ambulance arrived within 8 minutes of the initial emergency call. Paramedics quickly assessed both drivers and began providing immediate medical care. Officer Mitchell was conscious and able to communicate with the medical team, which was a positive sign. However, his left arm appeared to be broken, and he was experiencing significant pain in his chest area, suggesting possible rib injuries. Robert Chen required more intensive emergency care. The paramedics carefully stabilized his neck and spine before extracting him from the damaged truck. He had regained consciousness briefly, but was disoriented and complaining of severe head pain. The medical team worked efficiently to get him onto a stretcher and into the ambulance as quickly as possible, knowing that head injuries could be life-threatening if not treated promptly. Emma watched the emergency responders work with fascination and concern. She had never seen such organized chaos before, with police officers directing traffic, paramedics treating injured people, and firefighters working to make the vehicles safe. Her grandmother explained that these brave men and women trained extensively to help others during emergencies, and that Officer Mitchell and the truck driver were receiving the best possible care. As the ambulances prepared to leave for the hospital, Officer Mitchell looked toward Emma and Max through the rear window of his ambulance. Despite his injuries and the frightening experience he had just endured, he managed to wave slightly with his good hand. Emma waved back and Max wagged his tail as if he understood that the kind police officer was acknowledging their presence. The intersection gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy as the emergency vehicles departed and the damaged cars were towed away. However, Emma could see broken glass scattered on the pavement and skid marks from where the truck had tried unsuccessfully to stop. These physical reminders of the accident would remain visible for several days, serving as a sobering reminder of how quickly life could change. That evening, Emma sat quietly in her grandmother's living room, still processing what she had witnessed. Max lay beside her chair, occasionally looking toward the front door as if he was still thinking about the injured police officer. Mrs. Rodriguez made hot chocolate for Emma and sat down to talk with her granddaughter about the day's events, knowing that it was important to help the young girl understand and cope with what she had experienced. Emma asked many questions about accidents, hospitals, and whether Officer Mitchell would be able to return to work. Her grandmother answered each question patiently and honestly, explaining that while accidents were scary and unpredictable, most people recovered from their injuries with proper medical care and time to heal. She also praised Emma for staying calm during the emergency and for keeping Max under control when it mattered most. The next morning brought a steady rain that washed away the broken glass from the intersection, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about Officer Mitchell and the injured truck driver. She had barely slept, waking up several times during the night with images of the crash replaying in her mind. Max seemed to sense her distress and stayed close to her bed throughout the night, occasionally placing his large paw on her arm as if to comfort her. Mrs. Rodriguez made pancakes for breakfast, hoping to cheer up her granddaughter, but Emma only picked at her food. She kept looking toward the front window, where she could see the intersection that had been the scene of so much chaos just 12 hours earlier. The street looked normal again, with cars passing through safely and neighbors going about their usual Sunday morning routines. But Emma knew she would never see that corner the same way again. After breakfast, Emma asked her grandmother if they could find out how Officer Mitchell was doing at the hospital. Mrs. Rodriguez thought this was a wonderful idea and suggested they call the police station to inquire about his condition. The desk sergeant who answered the phone was very kind and explained that Officer Mitchell had undergone surgery to repair his broken arm and would need several weeks to recover from his other injuries, but he was expected to make a full recovery. The news about Officer Mitchell's condition brought Emma some relief, but she still worried about the truck driver. Mrs. Rodriguez called the hospital directly and after some difficulty getting information due to privacy policies, they learned that Robert Chen was in stable condition, but would need to remain hospitalized for several more days due to his head injury. The nurse mentioned that he had been asking about the police officer he had hit, showing that he was concerned about the consequences of his actions. Emma spent much of Sunday afternoon sitting on the front porch with Max, watching the intersection and thinking about the accident. Several neighbors stopped by to check on her and to discuss what they had witnessed. Mrs. Patterson, the retired nurse who had helped at the scene, told Emma that she had done exactly the right thing by staying calm and keeping Max under control during the emergency. She explained that animals could sometimes interfere with rescue efforts if they became too excited or frightened. That evening, Emma's parents arrived to pick her up and return home to the city. They had heard about the accident from Mrs. Rodriguez and were concerned about how their daughter was handling the traumatic experience. Emma told them everything she had seen, from Max's initial restlessness to the moment when the ambulances drove away with the injured men. Her parents listened carefully and assured her that it was normal to feel upset after witnessing something so frightening. During the drive home, Emma's father explained that accidents happened every day, often because people made poor choices like texting while driving or not paying attention to traffic signals. He emphasized that this was why it was so important to always follow safety rules, whether walking, riding a bicycle, or eventually learning to drive a car. Emma nodded thoughtfully, understanding that the truck driver's moment of distraction had nearly cost 2 people their lives. Over the next few days, Emma found it difficult to concentrate at school. Her teacher, Mrs. Williams, noticed that she seemed distracted and withdrawn during lessons. When Emma explained what she had witnessed over the weekend, Mrs. Williams decided to use the incident as an opportunity to discuss traffic safety with the entire class. She invited a police officer to visit the school and talk about the importance of paying attention while driving and walking near busy streets. The visiting officer turned out to be Officer Mitchell's partner, Sergeant Rodriguez, who knew all about the accident. He told the children that Officer Mitchell was recovering well and would return to work in about 6 weeks. Sergeant Rodriguez also explained that the truck driver, Robert Chen, had been charged with reckless driving and would have to pay a large fine and attend driving safety classes before getting his license back. Emma raised her hand during the presentation and asked whether dogs could really sense danger before humans could. Sergeant Rodriguez smiled and explained that dogs had much better hearing and smell than people, which sometimes allowed them to detect approaching vehicles or other potential hazards earlier than their human companions. He said that Max's behavior before the accident was probably a good example of this natural ability. After the school presentation, Emma felt better about the accident and began to see it as an important learning experience, rather than just a frightening memory. She realized that she and Max had been witnesses to something significant, and that their presence at the scene had somehow been meaningful. Mrs. Rodriguez had told her that several neighbors had commented on how brave and mature she had acted during the emergency. 2 weeks after the accident, Emma received an unexpected phone call from Officer Mitchell himself. He was calling from his home, where he was recovering from his injuries, to thank her for staying calm during the accident and for keeping Max from interfering with the rescue efforts. His voice sounded tired but cheerful, and he told Emma that he remembered seeing her and her dog watching from her grandmother's yard. Officer Mitchell explained that he had heard from other neighbors about how responsible Emma had been during the emergency. He said that many adults might have panicked or gotten in the way, but Emma had shown remarkable maturity for someone her age. He also mentioned that he was looking forward to meeting Max properly when he returned to patrol duty, as he had been impressed by the dog's intelligence and gentle nature. The phone call from Officer Mitchell meant everything to Emma. She had been worried that she hadn't done enough to help during the accident, but now she understood that sometimes the most helpful thing a person could do was to stay out of the way and let trained professionals handle the emergency. She also felt proud that Max had behaved so well under pressure, confirming her belief that he was an exceptionally smart and well-trained dog. Emma asked Officer Mitchell about the truck driver and was surprised to learn that Robert Chen had also been asking about her. Apparently, several witnesses had mentioned seeing a young girl and her dog watching from nearby, and Robert wanted to apologize for causing an accident that might have frightened a child. Officer Mitchell said that Robert seemed genuinely sorry for his careless driving, and was determined to be more careful in the future. That weekend, Emma and her parents decided to visit Mrs. Rodriguez again, partly to check on how the elderly woman was handling the aftermath of the accident. They found her in good spirits, though she admitted that she had been more cautious about letting Emma play in the front yard since the crash. The intersection had been equipped with a new flashing stop sign that was more visible to approaching drivers, and the city had also installed additional street lighting to improve safety. Emma noticed that Max seemed more relaxed during this visit, though he still paid careful attention to traffic at the intersection. She wondered if dogs could remember traumatic events the way humans did, and whether Max understood that they had witnessed something important together. Her father suggested that Max probably remembered the accident, but wasn't dwelling on it the way people sometimes did, which might be one advantage that animals had over humans. As they prepared to leave for home that Sunday evening, Emma realized that she was no longer afraid of the intersection or worried about visiting her grandmother's house. The accident had been frightening, but it had also taught her important lessons about safety, community, and the value of staying calm during emergencies. She felt more grown up somehow, as if witnessing the crash had given her a better understanding of how unpredictable and precious life could be. 3 weeks after the accident, Emma's life had returned to its normal routine of school, homework, and playing with Max in their small backyard. However, she often found herself thinking about Officer Mitchell and wondering how his recovery was progressing. Her parents had helped her write a get-well card that they mailed to the police station, but she hadn't heard anything back and was beginning to worry that he might have forgotten about her. One Saturday morning, Emma was surprised to see a familiar police car slowly driving down her street. She pressed her face against the front window and was amazed to see Officer Mitchell behind the wheel, though he was wearing a sling on his left arm and driving more carefully than usual. Max began barking excitedly, as if he somehow recognized the vehicle from their traumatic experience 3 weeks earlier. Officer Mitchell parked in front of Emma's house and carefully got out of his patrol car. Emma's mother answered the door when he knocked, and she invited him inside for coffee while Emma ran to get Max from the backyard. The officer explained that he was on light duty while his arm finished healing, which meant he could drive a patrol car, but couldn't handle physical confrontations or arrests until his doctor cleared him for full activity. When Emma brought Max into the living room, the dog immediately went to Officer Mitchell and sat quietly beside his chair. The officer gently petted Max with his good hand and told Emma that he had been thinking about both of them since the accident. He explained that he had received her get-well card and had wanted to visit in person to thank her properly for her behavior during the emergency. Officer Mitchell told Emma's parents that their daughter had impressed several witnesses with her maturity and composure during the accident. He said that many children her age would have screamed, run into the street, or become hysterical, but Emma had stayed calm and kept Max under control. He also mentioned that her presence at the scene had actually been helpful because other witnesses had used her location as a reference point when describing the accident to investigators. Emma was fascinated to learn that she had unknowingly played a role in the official investigation of the crash. Officer Mitchell explained that several neighbors had told police investigators things like the little girl with the dog saw the whole thing from her grandmother's front yard, which had helped establish the sequence of events leading up to the collision. Accurate witness statements were crucial for determining fault in traffic accidents and for processing insurance claims. The officer also brought news about Robert Chen, the truck driver who had caused the accident. Robert had been released from the hospital after 4 days and was recovering at home with his family. He had pleaded guilty to reckless driving charges and had voluntarily enrolled in an advanced driver safety course that was much more comprehensive than what the court had required. Robert had also written a letter of apology to Officer Mitchell and had asked if he could somehow apologize to the young witness who had seen the accident. Emma was surprised to learn that the truck driver wanted to meet her, and she wasn't sure how she felt about it. Officer Mitchell explained that Robert was genuinely sorry for his careless driving and was particularly concerned that a child had been frightened by his actions. He said that Robert had teenage children of his own and couldn't stop thinking about how the accident might have affected Emma emotionally. After discussing the situation with her parents, Emma decided that she would be willing to meet Robert Chen if Officer Mitchell thought it would be appropriate. The officer suggested that they could arrange a meeting at the police station, where Emma would feel safe and where there would be other adults present to ensure that the conversation remained positive and constructive. The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday afternoon at the community room in the police station. Emma's parents accompanied her, and Officer Mitchell was also present to facilitate the conversation. Max was allowed to come along because Officer Mitchell thought the dog's presence might help Emma feel more comfortable and confident. Robert Chen turned out to be a soft-spoken man who looked tired and somewhat older than his actual age of 43. He walked with a slight limp from his injuries and had a small scar on his forehead, where he had hit the dashboard during the crash. When he saw Emma, his eyes filled with tears, and he had to take a moment to compose himself before speaking. Robert began by apologizing to Emma for causing an accident that had frightened her and disrupted her peaceful weekend with her grandmother. He explained that he had been distracted by his cell phone and had failed to see the stop sign until it was too late to avoid the collision. He told Emma that he had thought about her every day since the accident and had worried that she might be having nightmares or feeling afraid of cars and trucks. Emma listened carefully to Robert's apology and was surprised by how sincere and remorseful he seemed. She had expected him to be angry or defensive, but instead, he appeared to be genuinely sorry for his mistake and concerned about how it had affected others. When he finished speaking, Emma told him that she hadn't been having nightmares and that she wasn't afraid of vehicles. Though she was more careful about watching traffic when she walked or rode her bicycle, Robert was visibly relieved to hear that Emma wasn't suffering from lasting emotional trauma from the accident. He told her that he had 3 children of his own, aged 12, 15, and 17, and that he couldn't imagine how he would feel if one of them had witnessed such a frightening event. He said that the accident had taught him an important lesson about the responsibility that came with driving a vehicle, and that he would never again use his cell phone while behind the wheel. During their conversation, Robert asked Emma about Max and was impressed by how well-behaved and intelligent the dog seemed. Officer Mitchell told Robert about Max's unusual behavior before the accident, explaining how the dog had seemed to sense that something was wrong even before the collision occurred. Robert said that he wished he had been paying as much attention to his surroundings as Emma's dog had been. Before the meeting ended, Robert asked Emma if there was anything he could do to make up for frightening her and disrupting her weekend. Emma thought for a moment and then suggested that Robert could visit schools to talk to other children about the importance of safe driving. She said that her teacher had already arranged for a police officer to speak to her class, but hearing from someone who had actually caused an accident might be even more meaningful. Robert was enthusiastic about Emma's suggestion and immediately began discussing the possibility with Officer Mitchell. The officer thought it was an excellent idea and offered to help Robert develop a presentation that would be appropriate for different age groups. He explained that the police department was always looking for new ways to educate young people about traffic safety, and that Robert's personal experience could be a powerful teaching tool. Emma felt good about suggesting the school visits because it meant that something positive could come from the accident. She realized that if Robert's story could prevent even one other person from texting while driving, then her frightening experience would have served a valuable purpose. Officer Mitchell praised Emma for her mature thinking and said that she had come up with an idea that could potentially save lives. As the meeting concluded, Robert shook hands with Emma's parents and thanked them for raising such a thoughtful and forgiving daughter. He promised to stay in touch with Officer Mitchell about the school presentation program and said that he would never forget the lesson he had learned from a 8-year-old girl who had turned a traumatic experience into an opportunity to help others. Max seemed to approve of Robert by the end of the meeting, even allowing the man to pet him gently before they left the police station. 2 months after the accident, Emma was delighted to learn that Officer Mitchell had been cleared for full duty and was back to his regular patrol schedule. His arm had healed completely, and he said he felt stronger than ever after weeks of physical therapy and rest. The first thing he did when he returned to work was drive through Emma's grandmother's neighborhood to see how the new safety improvements were working at the intersection where the accident had occurred. The city had installed not only the flashing stop sign that Emma had noticed, but also speed bumps on both approaching streets and bright yellow warning signs that read, "Slow children at play." Traffic through the intersection had slowed noticeably, and there had been no additional accidents since the new safety measures were put in place. Officer Mitchell felt satisfied that something positive had come from his frightening experience. Emma was thrilled when Officer Mitchell called to invite her and Max to visit the police station for a special tour. He explained that the department was planning to implement Robert Chen's school safety presentation program, and he wanted Emma to be among the first to see how her suggestion was being developed. Emma's parents were proud of their daughter's involvement in creating something that could benefit other children and agreed to the visit immediately. The police station tour was fascinating for Emma, who had never seen the inside of such a building before. Officer Mitchell showed her the dispatch center where emergency calls were received and coordinated, the holding cells where arrested suspects were temporarily housed, and the briefing room where officers received their daily assignments. Max was allowed to accompany them throughout the tour and was admired by several other officers who commented on his good behavior and intelligence. During the visit, Emma met Sergeant Rodriguez, Officer Mitchell's partner, who had spoken to her class about traffic safety several weeks earlier. The sergeant told Emma that her idea about having Robert Chen speak to students had been approved by the police chief and the school district, and that they were planning to launch the program within the next month. Several schools had already requested presentations, and Robert was working hard to prepare educational materials that would be appropriate for different age groups. Officer Mitchell showed Emma a draft of the presentation that Robert had developed with help from the police department's community outreach coordinator. The program included photographs of the accident scene, statistics about distracted driving, and Robert's personal account of how a moment of carelessness had nearly cost 2 people their lives. Emma was impressed by how honest and straightforward Robert's presentation was, and she thought it would definitely make students think twice about the dangers of distracted driving. Emma was surprised to learn that Robert had specifically requested that she and Max be present for his first presentation at Jefferson Elementary School, which happened to be Emma's own school. Robert felt that having the actual witness to his accident in the audience would make his message more powerful and believable. Emma was nervous about being in front of her entire school, but she was also excited about the opportunity to help other children learn important safety lessons. The presentation was scheduled for the following Friday during an all-school assembly. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Williams, had prepared the students by discussing traffic safety throughout the week and explaining that they would be hearing from someone who had learned a very important lesson the hard way. She also told the students that one of their own classmates had witnessed the accident and had suggested the idea for the presentation program. On the day of the presentation, Emma felt butterflies in her stomach as she walked into the school gymnasium with Max on his leash. Robert Chen was already there, setting up his display materials and testing the microphone with help from Officer Mitchell and the school's audio-visual coordinator. When Robert saw Emma, he smiled warmly and thanked her again for suggesting the school presentation program. Emma and Max sat in the front row with Emma's parents, who had taken time off from work to attend the special assembly. Mrs. Rodriguez was also present, having driven in from her suburban neighborhood to support Emma and to see how her granddaughter's idea was being implemented. The gymnasium filled with students from kindergarten through 5th grade, all chattering excitedly about the special presentation. Principal Johnson introduced Robert Chen and Officer Mitchell to the assembled students, explaining that they were going to learn about traffic safety from someone who had made a serious mistake and wanted to help others avoid making the same error. The principal also mentioned that the presentation program had been suggested by one of their own students, though he didn't identify Emma by name at her request. Robert began his presentation by showing the students a photograph of his damaged red truck after the accident. The image was dramatic but not frightening, showing the crumpled front end and deployed airbags without any blood or graphic details. He explained that the damage had been caused when he failed to stop at an intersection because he was looking at his cell phone. Instead of watching the road, the students listened intently as Robert described the moment of the accident and the fear he had felt when he realized he was about to hit a police car. He talked about waking up in the hospital and learning that he had injured Officer Mitchell, who was just trying to do his job and keep the community safe. Robert's voice became emotional as he described how sorry he felt about causing pain and suffering because of his careless Behavior Officer Mitchell then spoke to the students about the importance of paying attention while walking, riding bicycles, or traveling in cars. He explained that both drivers and pedestrians had responsibilities to watch for potential dangers and follow traffic rules that were designed to keep everyone safe. He also talked about how quickly accidents could happen and how difficult it was for emergency responders to help injured people. Emma was invited to stand up when Officer Mitchell talked about witnesses to the accident, and she felt her face turn red as several hundred students turned to look at her. Max stood up beside her and wagged his tail, which made some of the younger students laugh and helped Emma feel less nervous. Officer Mitchell explained that Emma had stayed calm during the emergency and had helped investigators understand exactly what had happened. During the question and answer session, several students asked Robert about his injuries and whether he was afraid to drive now. Robert answered honestly, explaining that he had been scared to get behind the wheel for several weeks after the accident, but that he had gradually regained his confidence by taking a defensive driving course and promising himself to never again use his phone while driving. One fourth-grade student asked Emma what it had been like to see the accident happen. Emma stood up and spoke into the microphone that Officer Mitchell held for her, saying that it had been very scary, but that she was glad the emergency responders had arrived quickly to help both drivers. She also said that Max had seemed to know something was wrong before the accident happened, which led to several questions about whether dogs could predict accidents. Officer Mitchell explained that dogs had better senses than humans and could sometimes hear or smell approaching vehicles before people noticed them. He said that Max's behavior before the accident was a good example of why it was important to pay attention to pets and other animals who might notice dangers that humans missed. Several students looked impressed by this information and began asking their teachers if they could learn more about animal senses. The presentation concluded with Robert showing the students a short video he had made with his own teenage children, who talked about how frightened they had been when they learned about their father's accident. The video was particularly effective because it showed real young people discussing the consequences of distracted driving from a family perspective. Emma thought it was brave of Robert's children to appear in the video and share their personal experiences. After the successful presentation at Jefferson Elementary School, word spread quickly throughout the school district about Robert Chen's powerful safety program. Within 2 weeks, 5 additional schools had requested presentations, and the local newspaper wanted to write a feature story about the unique partnership between an accident victim, a police officer, and the young witness who had inspired the educational initiative. Emma was initially hesitant about being interviewed by a newspaper reporter, but her parents encouraged her to participate because the story could help spread awareness about traffic safety to an even larger audience. The reporter, Sarah Martinez, was a kind woman who specialized in writing positive stories about community members making a difference. She assured Emma that the article would focus on the safety message rather than on the dramatic details of the accident. The newspaper interview took place at Emma's grandmother's house, with Mrs. Rodriguez serving homemade cookies and lemonade, while Sarah Martinez asked thoughtful questions about the accident and its aftermath. Max sat quietly beside Emma throughout the interview, occasionally drawing attention from the photographer, who wanted to capture images of the girl and her faithful companion who had witnessed the life-changing event together. Emma explained to the reporter how frightened she had initially been by the accident, but how meeting Robert Chen and Officer Mitchell had helped her understand that good things could come from scary experiences. She talked about how proud she felt that her suggestion had led to a program that might prevent other accidents and save lives. Sarah Martinez was impressed by Emma's maturity and insight, noting that many adults would struggle to find such positive meaning in a traumatic experience. The newspaper article was published on the front page of the Sunday edition, with a large photograph showing Emma, Max, Officer Mitchell, and Robert Chen standing together outside the police station. The headline read, "8-year-old's idea turns accident into learning opportunity," and the story detailed how a moment of careless driving had evolved into a community-wide effort to promote traffic safety education. The article generated significant interest throughout the region, with several other newspapers requesting permission to reprint the story and multiple radio stations wanting to interview the participants. Emma found herself becoming something of a local celebrity, which was both exciting and overwhelming for a girl who had previously been quite shy around strangers. Max seemed to enjoy the attention and posed patiently for photographs whenever reporters visited. Robert Chen's presentation program expanded rapidly as word spread about its effectiveness. He had now spoken to over 15 schools, reaching more than 3,000 students with his message about the dangers of distracted driving. Many teachers reported that their students had gone home and talked to their parents about putting away cell phones while driving, suggesting that the program was having a real impact on family behaviors. Officer Mitchell had been asked to accompany Robert to several presentations at high schools, where teenage students who would soon be learning to drive were particularly receptive to the safety message. The combination of Robert's personal story and Officer Mitchell's professional expertise proved to be very effective with older students who sometimes thought they were too mature to benefit from safety lectures. Emma received dozens of letters from children at other schools who had heard Robert's presentation and wanted to thank her for suggesting the program. Many of the letters included drawings of dogs, police cars, or stop signs, and several students wrote about their own experiences with traffic safety or their pet's ability to sense danger. Emma kept all the letters in a special scrapbook that her mother helped her create. One particularly touching letter came from a 10-year-old boy named Marcus, whose father had been injured in a similar accident caused by a distracted driver. Marcus wrote that hearing Robert's presentation had helped him understand that the person who had hit his father wasn't necessarily a bad person, but rather someone who had made a serious mistake. The boy's letter helped Emma realize that her idea was helping children cope with difficult experiences, not just learn about safety. 3 months after the newspaper article was published, Emma received an unexpected phone call from the governor's office. She was being invited to receive a state award for young citizens who had made significant contributions to community safety. The ceremony would take place at the state capitol, and Emma would be allowed to bring her family and Max to the event. Emma was nervous about receiving such an important award, but her parents assured her that she deserved the recognition for turning a frightening experience into something that was helping protect other children. Mrs. Rodriguez was particularly proud and insisted on buying Emma a new dress for the ceremony. The elderly woman said she had always known her granddaughter was special, but she had never imagined that Emma would be honored by the state government. The award ceremony was held in the governor's reception room, with about 50 people in attendance, including other award recipients, their families, and various government officials. Emma wore her new blue dress and carried a small speech that she had written with help from her parents and her teacher. Max was allowed to attend wearing a special red bandana that Officer Mitchell had given him for the occasion. Governor Patricia Williams personally presented Emma with a bronze medallion and a certificate recognizing her contribution to traffic safety education. The governor told the audience that Emma's story demonstrated how young people could make a difference in their communities by thinking creatively about solutions to serious problems. She said that the presentation program inspired by Emma's idea had already reached over 5,000 students and would likely prevent numerous accidents in the future. During her brief acceptance speech, Emma thanked Robert Chen for being brave enough to share his mistake with others, Officer Mitchell for supporting the program, and all the teachers and police officers who were helping to spread the safety message. She also mentioned Max, saying that her dog had taught her that sometimes the most important thing a person could do was pay attention to their surroundings and trust their instincts when something seemed wrong. After the ceremony, Emma and her family were invited to tour the state capitol building and meet with several other government officials who were interested in expanding traffic safety education programs. Emma was amazed by the size and grandeur of the building, and she felt proud to be representing her community at such an important place. Max attracted considerable attention from the officials, many of whom wanted to hear about his unusual behavior before the accident. The local television news covered Emma's award ceremony, broadcasting a short segment that evening about the young girl whose quick thinking had led to a statewide safety initiative. The news report included footage of Emma receiving her award, brief interviews with Officer Mitchell and Robert Chen, and scenes from one of Robert's school presentations. Emma watched the broadcast with her family and felt amazed that her simple suggestion had grown into something so significant. Emma's teacher arranged for her to share her experiences with her classmates, When she returned to school the following Monday, she brought her award to show the other students and talked about how ordinary people could make extraordinary differences by caring about their communities and thinking about how to solve problems. Several of her classmates said they were inspired by Emma's story and wanted to find ways to help make their own neighborhoods safer. The presentation program continued to grow, with Robert Chen now traveling to schools throughout the state and training other accident survivors to share their stories with students. Officer Mitchell had been promoted to sergeant and was leading the police department's expanded community outreach efforts. Emma felt proud knowing that her idea had created opportunities for other people to turn their difficult experiences into positive contributions to society. Emma's relationship with Max had grown even stronger through their shared experience and the attention that followed. She often told people that Max was the real hero of the story because he had sensed danger and tried to warn her before the accident happened. The dog seemed to understand that he was something of a celebrity, and he always behaved perfectly during public appearances and interviews. 1 year after the accident that had changed so many lives, Emma stood once again on her grandmother's front porch, looking toward the intersection where everything had begun. The corner looked completely different now, with additional safety features that had been installed as part of a citywide traffic improvement initiative inspired by the accident and the subsequent safety program. What had once been a simple four-way stop was now a model intersection used by traffic engineers from other cities. Max sat beside Emma, older and grayer, but still alert and protective. The dog was now considered something of a local legend, with children throughout the neighborhood asking their parents to tell them the story of the dog who could predict accidents. Emma smiled as she watched Max's ears perk up at the sound of approaching vehicles, though his behavior was now relaxed and normal rather than the agitated restlessness he had displayed on that fateful Saturday afternoon. Mrs. Rodriguez joined Emma on the porch, carrying a folder full of newspaper clippings, letters, and photographs documenting the remarkable journey that had followed the accident. The elderly woman had become something of a celebrity herself, frequently invited to speak at community meetings about how neighborhoods could work together to improve safety. She often joked that her quiet retirement had become much more exciting than she had ever expected. Emma's parents arrived for their weekly visit, bringing news that Robert Chen's presentation program had now reached over 20,000 students in 3 states. Robert had written a book about his experience titled The Text That Changed Everything, with proceeds donated to traffic safety organizations. The book included a chapter about Emma and Max, describing how a young girl's compassionate suggestion had transformed a moment of carelessness into a powerful force for positive change. Officer Mitchell, now Sergeant Mitchell, stopped by during his patrol to check on Emma and to share the latest statistics about traffic safety in their community. Accidents at intersections throughout the city had decreased by 30% over the past year, with much of the improvement attributed to increased awareness resulting from Robert's presentations and the media coverage of Emma's story. The police department had received a national award for innovative community policing, specifically citing the accident survivor presentation program. Emma had grown noticeably over the past year, both physically and emotionally. She was now 9 years old and in 4th grade, where she served as a peer mediator helping other students resolve conflicts peacefully. Her teacher often used Emma's experience as an example of how young people could find constructive ways to respond to difficult situations. Emma had also joined the school safety patrol, wearing an orange belt and helping younger children cross streets safely. The transformation in Robert Chen had been equally remarkable. Once a distracted driver who nearly killed 2 people, he had become one of the state's most effective advocates for traffic safety. His presentations had evolved from simple apologies into sophisticated educational programs that included interactive demonstrations, virtual reality simulations, and partnerships with driving instructors. Robert often said that meeting Emma had changed his life more profoundly than the accident itself. Emma received regular updates about the impact of the presentation program through letters from teachers, parents, and students around the region. One particularly meaningful letter came from a teenage girl whose mother had started putting her phone in the glove compartment while driving after hearing Robert speak at her school. The girl credited the presentation with potentially saving her family from an accident similar to the one that had started everything. Max, had become an unofficial therapy dog at several schools, where Robert presented, with administrators noting that his calm presence helped students feel more comfortable during discussions about serious topics like accidents and injuries. Animal behaviorists who heard about Max's pre-accident behavior had studied his case and confirmed that dogs could indeed sense approaching danger through subtle environmental cues that humans typically missed. Emma's hometown had declared the anniversary of the accident as Community Safety Day, with schools and organizations throughout the area hosting special events focused on accident prevention and emergency preparedness. Emma was invited to be the honorary spokesperson for the first annual observance, though she insisted that Robert Chen and Sergeant Mitchell share the spotlight with her. During the Community Safety Day ceremony, Emma delivered a speech that she had written entirely by herself, reflecting on the lessons she had learned over the past year. She talked about how frightening experiences could sometimes lead to positive outcomes if people were willing to look for opportunities to help others. She emphasized that ordinary people, including children, could make extraordinary differences in their communities by caring about others and thinking creatively about solutions. Emma announced during her speech that she and her family were establishing a scholarship fund to help young people pursue careers in emergency services, traffic engineering, or community safety. The Emma and Max Safety Scholarship would provide financial assistance to students who demonstrated both academic achievement and a commitment to protecting others. The idea had been Emma's own, developed with help from her parents and inspired by her desire to ensure that the positive impact of her experience would continue for years to come. The scholarship announcement generated enthusiastic applause from the audience, which included many of the people who had been touched by Emma's story over the past year. Robert Chen and his family were present, along with Sergeant Mitchell and numerous teachers, students, and community leaders who had supported the various safety initiatives that had grown from Emma's original suggestion. As the ceremony concluded, Emma realized that the frightening accident she had witnessed had ultimately brought together an entire community around the shared goal of protecting children and families. What had begun as a moment of terror had evolved into lasting friendships, innovative safety programs, and a renewed commitment to looking out for one another. Emma walked home that evening with Max trotting beside her, reflecting on how much her life had changed since that Saturday afternoon, when she had been simply brushing her dog's fur on her grandmother's front porch. She had learned that even young people could make important contributions to their communities, that scary experiences could lead to positive outcomes, and that the support of caring adults could help children accomplish things they never thought possible. Max seemed to sense Emma's contemplative mood and stayed close to her side as they walked through the neighborhood that had become safer because of their shared experience. Emma paused at the intersection where everything had started, noting the memorial plaque that had been installed to recognize the collaborative effort that had emerged from the accident. The plaque read, "In recognition of community members who transformed a moment of crisis into lasting positive change for all." Emma smiled as she read the inscription, knowing that her name was engraved on the back of the plaque along with those of Robert Chen, Sergeant Mitchell, and even Max. She felt proud of what they had all accomplished together, but she was most pleased about the thousands of children who would grow up safer because of the lessons that had emerged from one dog's unusual behavior and one little girl's compassionate suggestion. As Emma and Max reached their front door, Emma looked back one more time toward her grandmother's house and the intersection that had changed so many lives. She felt grateful for the experience despite its initial terror, because it had taught her that every person had the power to make a positive difference in the world. With Max by her side and a community that had rallied around her idea, Emma looked forward to discovering what other ways she might help protect and serve others in the years ahead. The story of the little girl and her dog who witnessed an accident had become a story about the power of community, the importance of safety, and the remarkable things that could happen when people chose to respond to tragedy with hope and determination to prevent future suffering. Emma knew that she would remember these lessons for the rest of her life, and she hoped that other children who heard her story would be inspired to find their own ways to make the world a safer place.